Winter in Chicago cuts like a blade. The fine snow dusted the sleek glass facade of Stratmore Capital, a 52-story financial tower where I had poured 8 years of my life. I'm Emily Parker, 32 years old, a single mother to Ben, my little 8-year-old warrior battling chronic asthma. Each month, his medications and hospital bills eat up nearly my entire paycheck as a senior executive assistant. But at least, I used to think I had some stability here. I used to think, until today. My phone buzzed last night, an email from Peter James, the CEO. Emergency meeting, 7:30 a.m. tomorrow. Private, strictly confidential, just me and him. No HR, no legal counsel, no witnesses. Every red flag in my head lit up. That's not how this company handles terminations. At a firm like Stratmore, poised for an IPO, every personnel decision goes through meticulous legal documentation. But still, I showed up. The door to the conference room on the 35th floor shut behind me. The space was bright but cold. Peter stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing out over the frozen Chicago River snaking through the city. When he turned to face me, he looked as polished as always tailored navy suit, deep blue silk tie, a faint trace of Tom Ford cologne. But this time, his wedding ring spun nervously around his finger, a telltale sign. I'd seen it before, whenever he lied to the board. "Thank you for coming early, Emily," he said, his voice smooth as ever, but his eyes completely empty. I sat down, cautious. "What's so urgent, Peter?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. He sighed and offered a faint smile. "I'm afraid, Emily, this will be your last day at Stratmore." My stomach dropped. "Why?" I asked, though it felt like a hammer had just struck my chest. Internal compliance received an anonymous report alleging an inappropriate relationship between you and me, he said, the thin smile still on his lips. With the IPO looming, any potential scandal could devastate us. The board decided to terminate your employment immediately to contain the risk. I froze. An inappropriate relationship, me and Peter. This was a blatant lie. My throat tightened, rage choking my words. He raised his hand gently, as if comforting me. "I know. You feel wronged. But the media doesn't need proof. Emily, rumors are enough. And I think, for your sake, and Ben's, it's best we end things quietly." Ben. The sound of my son's name sliced through the icy air. My hand gripped my purse tightly. A cold dread crawled down my spine. He slid a brown envelope across the table toward me, a severance agreement offering $50,000 in exchange for my absolute silence. A non-disclosure clause sealed tight. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "Honestly, this is the best outcome for everyone. You can protect your son, preserve your dignity, and leave gracefully. Or make things harder for yourself." I stared at him. In that moment, beneath the polished CEO exterior, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Not fear for the company. He was hiding something much filthier. The office door clicked softly open. I heard the familiar click of high heels echoing down the hallway. Then, the light giggle of Vanessa the young, curvy secretary who had replaced me less than 3 weeks ago. There are only two kinds of laughter like that, mocking or victorious. My hands trembled, but I swallowed my fury, stood up, and locked eyes with Peter. "You'll regret this," I said, my voice low and steady. Peter merely smirked. "I doubt that." "Emily." I turned and walked out, passing Vanessa lingering near the elevators. Her eyes flicked over me with thinly veiled contempt before pretending not to see me. But I saw. I felt every whisper, every rumor creeping through those polished hallways. Inside the elevator, as the stainless steel doors slid shut, I slumped back against the wall. The dizziness hit hard. Cold sweat beaded at my temples. 8 years of dedication, 8 years of fighting to support my son, and he crushed it all in mere minutes. I closed my eyes. But then Ben's face flashed before me, his little voice last night asking, "Mom, can we go to the water park this summer if you get a raise?" A flame ignited deep in my chest. I opened my eyes and whispered, "No, Peter. I won't walk away quietly. I will find out the truth." Rumors spread like wildfire in a dry forest. The next morning, when I walked into my old office to pick up my personal belongings, every eye locked onto me. The looks were a twisted mix of curiosity, disdain, and predatory amusement, as if they were watching a walking corpse. Nobody even bothered to whisper quietly anymore. Poor thing. Heard she tried to seduce the boss and got burned. Serves her right. Thought she found a golden ticket. Now she's got nothing. I bit my lip, forced my spine straight, and walked slowly down the long, glass-lined hallway. Outside, the Chicago River sparkled under the frigid winter sun, a harsh contrast to the venom boiling inside this office. I didn't need to guess who had ignited this mess. And I didn't have to wait long for confirmation. Just as I was gathering my papers and personal laptop, a familiar female voice sliced through the air behind me. "Emily." I turned around. There stood Vanessa. The burgundy bodycon dress hugged her flawless hourglass figure, her caramel brown hair cascading effortlessly over her shoulder. But what stood out most was the smug smile curling on her lips. Such a shame. But this office is fiercely competitive. Only the strong survive. Spare me the fake sympathy. I shot back coldly. Vanessa tilted her head, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. "I just wanted to wish you luck. Finding a new job. You know how hard it is out there for a single mom? Especially with little Ben." She emphasized Ben's name like a blade sliding across my throat. I tightened my grip on my bag. So many times I had tried not to see Vanessa as a threat when she first came on board as a junior assistant 3 months ago. I had even shown her the ropes, helped her get used to the system. Looking back now, every sweet smile and innocent question had been part of the chessboard she was setting up. It didn't stop there. Internal group chats started circulating cryptic messages and meme-like images mocking the failed CEO seductress. They didn't name me directly, but everyone knew who they were referring to. Their goal was clear pressure me into disappearing quietly. No lawsuit, no complaint, no explanation. But they forgot one thing I had no way out to begin with. That afternoon, I sat in my small South Loop apartment. Ben was asleep after another exhausting asthma attack. The only sound was the steady hum of the air purifier. My phone buzzed. It was Thomas. Thomas used to work IT at Stratmore. We had known each other for years before Peter forced him to resign voluntarily, after he dared report a major security breach Peter had buried before an audit. "Hey, Thomas." "Emily, I heard what happened." Wasn't hard to guess. He said, tension heavy in his voice. "I have something you need." I frowned. "What do you mean, a backup copy of the internal email server from last quarter? Before I left, I kept a copy just in case Peter tried to pin something on me." He lowered his voice. "There's a lot of dirt in there, including exchanges between Peter and Vanessa." I froze. "Emails? Between Peter and Vanessa? You're serious," I whispered. "Dead serious. And you need to see it right away. Peter isn't just throwing you under the bus. He's clearing the path for the biggest IPO of the year. If this leaks, the whole system crashes." I glanced at Ben sleeping peacefully. Rage and fear collided and tightened in my chest. This wasn't just about firing me. This had been a trap from the start. He used me as a scapegoat to shield his upcoming financial fraud and money laundering from any potential investigation. I took a deep breath. "Send it to me. Tonight. Thomas." "Be careful, Emily. Peter's not going to sit still." I smiled coldly in the empty apartment. Neither am I. I sat in the living room, the warm yellow light casting tense shadows across my face as each file from Thomas's hard drive slowly unfolded before me. A filthy underground world revealed itself through the emails between Peter and Vanessa. September 5th. Can you handle her? She talks too much. September 10th. Don't worry, a few rumors, some doctored pictures, and a conveniently private meeting the board won't suspect a thing. Your wife won't dare make it public either. October 15th. What about the offshore contracts for the IPO? October 18th. Taken care of. I've smoothed out all the financial records. If the auditors dig, they'll only find perfectly legal payments. My hands trembled as I read. They had been plotting for months, from the moment Vanessa waltzed in like a harmless little doll. They used me as a shield. If the affair rumors broke out, Peter would pin everything on me. The assistant tried to seduce her married boss, failed, and turned vindictive. The company's image would stay pristine, perfectly staged for the billion-dollar IPO. The sheer precision made my skin crawl. Thomas messaged again. I also found several hidden offshore bank accounts registered under shell companies in the Cayman Islands. This could prove money laundering, I replied. Is it enough to catch the FBI's attention? But to make it airtight, you'll need someone from their finance department to pull the internal balance sheets. I paused for a moment. One name flashed in my mind. Sophia. Sophia was a mid-level accountant. She had confided in me many times about the pressure Peter put on her to adjust the books before audits. But her husband was gravely ill. She was terrified of losing her job and had never dared speak up. If I could get Sophia on my side, Peter's entire house of cards would crumble. But I'd be dragging her into a dangerous war. The next morning, I met Sophia at a small cafe in River North, the spot we used to grab lunch whenever work got too overwhelming. The air was bitter cold. She sat bundled in a gray wool coat, her face pale from sleepless nights. I heard about what happened to you, Sophia whispered, glancing around nervously as if someone might be listening. The rumors are brutal. I'm so sorry. I met her eyes, deciding to cut straight to the point. Sophia, this isn't just about rumors. Peter and Vanessa are using you to cover up an entire money laundering operation ahead of the IPO. I have proof. I slid a USB drive toward her. Sophia flinched, her eyes flooding with fear. I can't. If they find out I'm involved, I'll lose everything. I gently clasped her icy hand. Sophia, I know you're scared. But you also know that once this IPO goes through, their laundered money will be clean, and will be nothing but the next disposable pawns. Sophia hesitated, her lips trembling. Do you think they'd hurt me? I swallowed hard. I can't promise they wouldn't. But the longer this goes on, the more dangerous they'll become for anyone who knows too much. We sat in silence for a few seconds before she finally exhaled a shaky breath. Okay, I'll get you the internal balance sheets. But just this once. I smiled gratefully, silently whispering to myself, the gates of hell just opened for you. Peter. That night, while organizing the files, my phone buzzed with an anonymous text. Stop. Emily, for your son's sake. This is your final warning. My breath caught. A cold shiver crawled up my spine. But this time, instead of fear, pure fury boiled inside me. They dared to drag Ben into this. I stared at the screen and whispered, as if Peter could hear me. It's you who should be scared now. Peter, 3 a.m. I sat in my dark apartment, the only light coming from the cold blue glow of my laptop screen. File after file was carefully encrypted and backed up onto multiple separate drives. Sophia had come through. The internal balance sheets were finally in my hands, and they were even worse than I'd imagined. Nearly $12 million had been funneled through offshore shell companies. The transactions didn't match up at all with the financial reports prepared for the IPO. This wasn't just some internal ethical violation. This was organized money laundering, federal-level financial fraud. I knew I was playing with fire now, not just with Peter, but with the entire system protecting him. Thomas called via video. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. I've checked everything. This is definitely offshore laundering. If you hand it over to the SEC or FBI, Peter won't just lose his job. He's looking at federal prison. I swallowed hard, but Thomas, I lowered my voice. If I hand this over now, can I really protect myself? And Ben Thomas paused for a moment before answering. They'll do everything they can to silence you before this gets public. Peter has lawyers and political shields all over the place. Then, we need another way. I exhaled, biting my lip in thought. Thomas nodded. Exactly. If you reveal everything directly in front of the shareholders and the press at the IPO event itself before the stock goes live, it'll explode instantly. Once it hits the media, the FBI won't be able to cover it up anymore. The plan started to take shape in my head. If I wanted to bring down the entire empire Peter had built, I needed to strike where it hurt most at the centerpiece of his pride, the historic IPO happening next week. The next day. I reached out to an old acquaintance, Brenda Keller, a veteran investigative journalist with the Chicago Financial Chronicle. We had crossed paths years ago when she exposed a major banking scandal. Brenda furrowed her brow as she scanned through the files I handed over. Jesus. Emily, this is a nuclear bomb. If you drop this on IPO day, it'll annihilate Stratmore Capital. I looked her straight in the eyes, voice steady. Exactly. But I don't want this to turn into some cheap clickbait scandal. I need every journalist to be present that day. The media needs to witness it live. Brenda's eyes gleamed with the thrill of the story. Don't worry, I'll handle that. You've got guts pulling this off right in their den. I respect that. I gave a faint smile. It's not about guts. I simply have no other choice. 2 days later, a black SUV pulled up in front of my apartment. A stranger knocked on my door. Ms. Parker? Please get in. Mr. James would like to speak with you. I froze for a moment, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. But I knew avoiding this now would only raise more suspicion. I had to face him. The car drove through Chicago's foggy streets in the dead of night, finally stopping at a private lakeside resort Peter often used. Inside a lavish conference room lined with walnut wood and soundproof glass, Peter was waiting. Vanessa sat beside him, legs crossed, blowing thin streams of vapor from her e-cigarette. Have a seat. Emily, Peter gestured, as if this was just another casual business negotiation. I stayed standing, arms crossed, eyes locked on his. Let's skip the small talk. Peter, what do you want? Peter gave a thin smile. I admire your persistence. But this game has gone too far. I don't want to escalate things, Vanessa chimed in, voice dripping with contempt. You really think a broke single mom like you can bring down this entire system? I answered coldly. Oh, I don't have to bring it down. I just need you to shoot yourselves in the head. Peter clenched the pen in his hand, trying to hold back his temper. Listen, Emily, we're willing to triple the settlement. Enough to send your son to any college in the country. In exchange, erase all this. Let's end it quietly. I stared straight into his eyes, only thinking of Ben, his labored breathing during asthma attacks, the expensive medications, the 14-hour workdays I endured just to pay for his treatments. No, Peter, I said slowly. Your money can't buy back my dignity. And it sure as hell won't buy justice for all the people you've deceived in this company. Vanessa cursed under her breath, but Peter raised his hand to silence her. He took a deep breath, his eyes darkening. You just refused your last chance at survival. Emily? I turned and walked toward the door without looking back. There was only one thought burning in my mind. The war has officially begun. 3 days before the IPO. I could feel Peter tightening his grip for one final counterattack. The closer we got to exposing the truth, the more aggressive he became. And this time, he aimed straight for my weakest spot, custody. That morning, while taking Ben to his regular hospital checkup, I received a call from a family law office I'd never contacted before. Good morning, Ms. A. Parker. I represent Mr. Peter James. We're calling to inform you that Mr. James has filed a petition with the Chicago Family Court requesting a review of custody for young Benjamin Parker, citing your current emotional and financial instability. I froze in the hospital corridor, nearly dropping my phone. Excuse me, I nearly shouted. Mr. Mwiyu, James has presented evidence suggesting obsessive behavior, invasion of privacy, and illegal activities on your part aimed at damaging his reputation. Combined with your current unemployment and signs of financial instability, he believes you are no longer capable of providing a stable environment for Benjamin. A chill ran up my spine. My legs felt like jelly. He was insane. He wanted to take Ben from me to shut me up completely. That night, Thomas came over. He brought 2 boxes of cold pizza and a look of deep worry. You okay? He asked the moment he walked in. I nodded weakly, my throat tight. Ben was asleep in the next room, wheezing softly, the nebulizer humming steadily. I whispered, as though afraid someone might hear. He doesn't just want to silence me. Thomas. He wants to take Ben from me. Thomas clenched his jaw and slammed his hand on the table. That bastard, he's a monster. I bit my lip. I know why he's doing this. He's betting I'll panic, destroy all the evidence, and give up everything just to keep custody of my son. Thomas stared at me, clearly shaken. Clearly, he knew I was facing the cruelest choice of my life: hold on to the evidence and destroy Peter, or sacrifice everything to protect my only child. But then he grabbed my hand tightly. We'll protect both. Trust me. I looked into his eyes for the first time in months. I didn't feel alone. The next day, as I stepped out of my apartment building, another black SUV pulled up. 2 sharply dressed men in tailored gray suits stepped out, eyes cold as steel. Ms. Parker, the taller one, spoke. We represent Stratmore Capital. You are in illegal possession of proprietary data and have committed intellectual property violations. If you do not immediately surrender all devices and materials, we will proceed with criminal charges. I stared back at them, the fear still there, but this time, eclipsed by anger. What about the money laundering, the falsified offshore contracts? Are you planning to file charges against anyone for that? I shot back coldly. They froze for a moment. The second man's grip tightened on his briefcase. You're only making your legal situation worse. Ms. Parker? The tall one hissed. I said nothing more. I simply turned and walked toward the elevator. They were baiting me, trying to corner me. But they forgot one thing: when you corner someone, that's when they hit back hardest. That evening, I held an emergency meeting with Brenda. Rumors about the custody fight are spreading. Emily, Brenda said, her face grave. Some financial bloggers are already implying you were fired due to mental instability after harassing Peter. I gave a bitter smile. Exactly the narrative he wants out there. Without this data in your hands, people would believe he's the victim. Brenda squeezed my hand. That's why we have to expose everything at the IPO. The media needs to witness the full truth before his lawyers can twist it. I nodded. There would be no more escape for them. That night, as I held Ben sleeping peacefully in my arms, I whispered into his hair, I promise. This time, no one will steal our life away again, and no one will ever touch you. The rage inside me was no longer fear. It had turned into steel cold, solid and unbreakable. Peter? Vanessa? You picked the wrong person to back into a corner. The big day finally arrived. The grand ballroom at the Palmer House Hotel. Chicago's proud financial landmark glittered under crystal chandeliers. packed with hundreds of investors, shareholders, and journalists for Stratmore Capital's grand IPO event. Peter James strode confidently down the red carpet, his custom-tailored navy suit fitting him like a king ascending his throne. Beside him, Vanessa smiled radiantly like a Hollywood starlet on Oscar night, every camera lens locked onto them. What Peter didn't know was that all those flashing lights would also witness his downfall. I stood silently at the back of the hall, blending into the crowd. In my ear, a Bluetooth earpiece connected me to Thomas, who was operating the presentation system remotely through a security loophole he had discovered earlier. Brenda and her journalist crew were already in position, scattered among the crowd. Peter stepped up to the podium. His voice rang out smooth and steady. As always, today marks a historic milestone. Stratmore Capital, built on transparency, ethics, and long-term vision, officially opens a new chapter on the global stock exchange. Polite applause echoed through the hall. Cameras clicked nonstop. I took a deep breath. My fingers trembled slightly. Thomas whispered into my earpiece. Ready. 3, 2, 1. Showtime. The massive LED screen behind Peter suddenly flickered, interrupting his polished financial presentation. Heads in the audience spun toward the screen. The display blinked back on, but instead of lush revenue charts, glowing red email headers flashed across, re-clearing the path before IPO handling. Emily Parker, offshore transfers complete in Cayman, Seychelles all set. If she threatens to expose anything, I've prepped internal rumors about the jilted assistant. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Cameras flashed like lightning. Several investors immediately pulled out their phones to photograph the screen. Internal compliance board members in the front row started murmuring anxiously. Peter froze mid-sentence. His eyes darted, scanning for the source. Vanessa's face paled, her lips pressed into a tight line. I stepped out from the crowd, walking directly toward the stage. Brenda and a few reporters followed closely, like sharks sensing blood in the water. My voice rang out, calm but sharp. Good afternoon. Everyone, I'm Emily Parker, the former assistant. This company fired and labeled morally unfit just 3 weeks ago. I raised a USB drive high, locking eyes with the stunned crowd. In my hand is the full chain of international money laundering transactions orchestrated over the past 2 years by Mr. Peter James and his accomplice, Ms. Vanessa Pearson, including internal emails, offshore contracts, and Cayman Islands bank records. The hall erupted like a market square in full chaos. Live TV cameras zoomed in on Peter's pale, frozen face. Peter's wife, Cynthia, stood abruptly from the front row, her eyes filled with tears, pointing at him. It's true, isn't it? Peter, you've been using everything, including me, this whole time. Peter stammered, unable to form words. Vanessa shrank beside him, ghost white. Event security began moving toward the stage. But before anyone could cut the broadcast feed, Brenda shoved a microphone forward with all this evidence displayed publicly. Miss Parker, are you ready to submit the full data to federal authorities right now? I nodded firmly, scanning the sea of journalists. Right here, right now. All evidence will be handed directly to the FBI, SEC, and the Department of Justice. Scattered applause broke out from the shareholder section, then grew into a thunderous ovation filling the entire ballroom. Peter stood paralyzed, gripping the microphone as though trying to find some last escape route while the crowd roared for justice. There was no escape. Just 10 minutes later, federal agents entered the hall. Peter's perfectly tailored collar was pulled tight under handcuffs. Vanessa was led away at the same time. Cameras flashed wildly like a rain of bullets around the two who had moments earlier believed they were untouchable. I quietly stepped back, inhaling deeply. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. The battle was over, but the real victory had only just begun. 3 months after that fateful day, Chicago was still cold. But to me, the sky had never looked bluer. The federal trial ended exactly the way I had imagined during those long, terrifying nights. Peter James's name flooded every national headline, but this time, not as the successful financial CEO. Stratmore Capital collapses in largest money laundering scandal in Chicago, IPO history. Peter James, sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for money laundering, financial fraud, and abuse of power. Vanessa didn't escape either. With irrefutable evidence of her collusion, she was sentenced to 15 years for international money laundering and falsifying financial records. On sentencing day, I sat quietly in the courtroom gallery. Vanessa never once looked at me. The fiery red dress she had once worn so confidently at the IPO was now replaced by the pale orange of a prison jumpsuit. Peter's wife, Cynthia, filed for divorce within the first week after the scandal exploded. Even Chicago's notoriously ruthless financial circles were shocked by the depth of deception her husband had hidden. As for me, I reclaimed everything they once tried to steal. After the IPO disaster, the media swarmed me, eager to paint me as a new symbol of justice rising from Chicago's version of Wall Street. But I had no interest in becoming a media celebrity. 1 week later, Baker and Sloan Ethics Advisory, the largest corporate audit and legal ethics firm in the country, offered me a senior advisory role in corporate fraud investigation. The salary was triple what Stratmore had paid, with the comprehensive health insurance I had always dreamed of for Ben. I stood on the 38th floor of my new office, overlooking the winding Chicago River glistening in the spring sun. The spacious glass-walled office bathed in light felt like a symbol of the life I had finally stepped into. My phone rang. It was Thomas. "Congratulations on your new corner office," he teased. I smiled. Never thought things would turn around this fast. "How's Benny?" asked. "He's doing great. His checkup last week went really well. The doctor says his breathing's stabilized a lot." I glanced at the framed photo of me and Ben sitting proudly on my desk. "You kept your promise to him, Emily," Thomas said softly. "You didn't just protect him, you taught him the power of truth." I was silent for a moment before whispering, and to myself, too. For the first time in my life, I know I don't have to bow my head to anyone anymore. That afternoon, I took Ben to Millennium Park, the place he had dreamed of visiting after every long treatment. He ran and laughed under the clear sky, his joyful voice echoing across the plaza. I sat on a bench, watching the little boy I had risked everything to protect. Images flashed through my mind the day I was fired. Peter's smug stare, Vanessa's poisonous smile, the venomous whispers that once filled Stratmore's halls. Now they were all just ashes. They thought cornering me would break me, but it was in that corner where I stood up stronger than ever. Ben ran over, wrapping his little arms tightly around me. "Mom, can we go to Disney World this summer?" I laughed, hugging him back. "Absolutely, sweetheart. From now on, every summer will be perfect." The golden-orange sunset bathed Chicago's skyline in brilliant light. A gentle breeze swept through my hair, carrying a peace I hadn't felt in years. At last I had won. But more importantly, I had survived.